devil do you think you're doing?
Becca. But it's the picture, the one in the gallery. What is it? What have I done?
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Josh Giegel, who is the CEO and co-founder of Virgin Hyperloop. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So just before beginning this recording, I was just sharing that you're a very interesting CEO because you've really gone through all of it from the beginning to really just working through the different roles up to this current CEO position. But even before that, if this organization, you've worked with a lot of interesting technologies from fluid thermal systems, photon Monte Carlo radioactive heat transfer modeling, DNS, LES, layer transition of hypersonic flow to propulsion systems. And it's interesting because when you talk about the kind of sector that you're in, you really kind of need almost all of it, right? So for those that are not as familiar, can you introduce what Virgin Hyperloop is and what are you guys looking to achieve?
So Virgin Hyperloop is building a new form of mass transportation. So we have a tube that we take most of the air out of. It'd be like flying at about 200,000 feet of altitude. And that allows us to go the speed of an aircraft for a fraction of the drag. And to do that, we have a pod. And on that pod, we have our fully electric powertrain. So we've developed new motors, new forms of magnetic levitation that are about 10 times more energy efficient than other existing magnetic levitations. And then the pods themselves are autonomous. So these pods are going directly to your destination at a high speed. They're not stopping at every place along the way. They form convoys so that you can have a high capacity system moving tens of thousands of passengers per hour. And ultimately, we're able to achieve that with what I'd call a smart vehicle dumb road. So if you think about a car and a road, the reason a Model T from over 100 years ago can drive on the same road as a Model 3 is the road is simple, has no moving parts. And so we wanted to adopt that same thing here. So by having a very dumb tube and having all the smarts in the pod, we're able to go directly to your destination without stopping.
So I guess maybe a good starting point is, for those that are listening that are not familiar with this technology, they're probably asking the question, it seems like a lot of infrastructural work that needs to be built. It's brand new infrastructure. It's already hard enough to maintain what's already on the road. And certainly, of course, it circumvents and addresses a lot of the issues that we have with the road issue. But how do we address it from both the build out of the infrastructure, but also the scaling aspects and the maintenance aspects?
So one of the big things that we're looking to do is our system is a high capacity system, which means we want to be able to take a lot of volume of passengers and goods. And so when you're building a system, you can have these trunk lines between major cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. And instead of having to have a 10-lane freeway, we could have essentially all of that traffic fitting inside of a two tubes, one each direction. And that means that you need less physical right-of-way, which means you need less land. You need less actual space around the tubes because you don't have all of the extra lanes that you would need. And then also the ability to do this with a fraction of the energy use. So you're able to move all of these people at the speed of an aircraft for about 5 to 10 times less energy, meaning you're doing less pollution, you're doing all of these things. You're able to do that safely because you're inside of an encapsulated environment. And so one of the things that we find really important here is that it's this combination of speed, capacity, and level of service that gives a unique perspective to the end user and a unique benefit to the customer and ultimately the rider.
Well, certainly, I think for those that live in kind of the bi-coastal cities that have high congestion, they've seen over the years of how adding additional lanes or even carpool lanes really doesn't address the fundamental issue. So from a throughput and high scaling aspect, this is incredibly important. Do you have some modeling around, at what point would the kind of the two lane going opposing direction would exceed a certain capacity and that you need to build additional tubes?
So you're looking, a single tube can hold about peak anywhere between about 60 and 80,000 passengers per hour, which is some of the highest, most dense kind of metro systems that you would encounter in the world. And the big part that we want to do is that's like an extremely high capacity, but that means once you build the first line, you can have lots of like the dumbbell effect on either end without actually saturating the capacity of that line. And so most types of routes in the US might be doing kind of a peak of maybe 10 to 20,000 between any single city pair. But as soon as you start to think, on the Eastern Seaboard, you've got Baltimore to DC, Philadelphia to DC, New York to DC, Boston to DC. As soon as you start to aggregate them all through that Baltimore to DC link, that's where you want that high volume capacity to be able to deal with all of the traffic that you'll eventually connect at either end. It also what makes the first lines you build so valuable because you can continue to monetize that as you connect more and more people to it.
Now, one of the things that I was saying at the beginning was that you've played not only a technical role, but of course a leadership role as well. And so you've seen the various different stages within the design, the development, and then eventually the implementation aspects. And I wonder if you could talk about some of the more kind of the difficult technical or engineering problems that had to be solved over the years.
That's a fascinating question. And the journey through Hyperloop is actually, it's kind of a journey through the state of the art of technology, right? And so the very first system that we built in Las Vegas was using our concepts from 2015 and 2016. And that was where we didn't have technology, whether it was batteries or power electronics or other control systems that were good enough to put everything on the vehicle. So we built what's called a Wayside System. And that means the motor, all of the fancy things were on the track as opposed to on the vehicle. And it wasn't until really 2018 that batteries became good enough, that our innovative maglev design, that the controls and the sensor fusion that we do was possible to actually make this pod side powered vehicle. So once we were able to develop that and the technology that was commercially available, we were able to incorporate into our system, you saw a radical shift in the technology that we could actually build. And then furthermore, as we get down the line, we're seeing the ability to incorporate machine learning and data analytics into the way that we do testing, into the way that we do fleet optimization. And those are actually making more requirements, or in some cases, less requirements on the vehicle, because now we can operate the vehicle in a very different way through what I'd call a lot of, operations research. Like, how do you take a fleet of vehicles? Do you queue them? How do you set we call air docks where people get on and off of the vehicles? How do you queue that in a way that means you have a very high utilization? So one of the things I'm really excited about Hyperloop is it's at over 80% utilization, or what I call like butts in seats. And that's a much higher way than typical rail and much in many automobiles because of the efficient way we can utilize these systems with on-demand scheduling.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah, and on the hardware side, it's really interesting because there are so many dependencies that are really kind of outside of your control until certain domains or areas of specialization get to a certain point of maturity, or even miniaturization or density in the case of energy storage, for instance. So heavily dependent, but once you hit that kind of tipping point, and now you could transfer so many of the components and capability onto the actual pod itself. Amazing, absolutely amazing. I'm sure that was a pivotal moment for the organization when you guys were able to do that. It's also interesting around this notion of smarter, more intelligent, predictive modeling, because that, I would imagine, that perhaps means less set of sensors or less just kind of components that's needed, because you need less, let's say, more kind of reactive aspects or safety prevention, reactive versus more predictive and optimization oriented approach.
You may also like our quarterly Ask Your Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit astroperkins.com/events.
Yeah, and so our vehicles have really kind of two layers, what we call kind of pod control and then fleet control. And the pods are really designed to save themselves and deal with the environments around. And I'll say one of the things I'm really excited about is we fly at the speed of an aircraft. We have as much power as a locomotive, and we're the size of a bus flying inside of a low pressure tube. So there's a lot of different things going on. And the ability to leverage our, what I'd call kind of digital twin technology, our simulation capability to run loads of simulations or virtual miles, if you will, on this actual equipment, sometimes with hardware in the loop, sometimes with the software in the loop, gives us the opportunity to really test and vet a lot of things without having to do really expensive, potentially risky tests from a hardware point of view. And that allows us to develop things that typically have only been developed either by nation states like Japan developing rail or China developing their own high-speed rail, or very large organizations like Siemens developing the maglev in the 70s and 80s. And so we're doing that with venture capital, and we're able to do that with a much smaller team, about 200 or so engineers and 300 total people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to see a lot of those types of applications. I think I recall a modeling of these kind of polygon types of shapes in a kind of virtual environment, and those learnings being then pulled into the actual physical robot form, so they know how to actually navigate around stairs, ascending, descending, and other courses without having to actually physically go through doors and just pick up miles over time. So really powerful in terms of digital twin modeling aspects. Now, at the heart of what you guys are doing is really sustainability, right? Because when we think about kind of the new city centers or new regional areas where we're trying to really strip out the carbon aspects, we need more walking, we need more cycling in the city centers, more open space, more trees. But at the same time, those goods and services still need to, and people transport has to come in through the city center and around it as well. And this is incredibly important that you can't really accomplish on the road per se, or even through flying vehicles, which is going to have its own set of issues.
Yeah. And one of the things that the pandemic has actually really taught us is, as much as we were not allowed to be together, is that we crave being together. And the other thing that we saw was this reduction of pollution, reduction of congestion along the roads. And so for us, sustainability is absolutely ingrained into what we're trying to do, from an energy efficiency side of the fence to the way that we actually build the infrastructure, because the tubes, construction is actually one of the biggest sectors for emissions on the face of the earth. And so how we do that, how we source the materials, the way in which we do that, we're really pleased. We're finishing up some studies right now that are going into the total life cycle carbon footprint of a vehicle, of our tube, of our whole product, because ultimately we're seeing places in the world like France, for example, banning short haul flights. So there's a great reason that they're doing that. They're doing that to save the environment, but at the same time, it's forcing people onto trains with a much lower user experience, right? It takes longer. It might be more of a headache. It might be all the things that we don't want. So the responsibility of us as engineers when it comes to sustainability is let people live the way they want to live, but let's do that in a way that doesn't destroy the environment around us. And I think, recently I became a dad, I've got a 3-year-old now, and thinking about him living till, 22 or 2100 is that, what is he going to experience? He's going to have a radically different environmental life than I do. And what can I do? What can he look up to me and say, Dad, you're an engineer. When the world was heating up, what did you do? And that's why this is really important to us, to pretty much everybody here. The number of electric vehicles in the parking lot are there. And we see this as being an alternative to what's going to become, heavy short haul flights in terms of the pollution aspects that they would have. And even electric flights are still going to consume more energy. That means bigger batteries or more solar farms or wind farms having to go to that. So let's change the physics and let's reduce the actual drag and energy consumption to begin with.
I love it. And by the way, congratulations. I think what's really exciting is that we can actually have it all. And it's kind of rare when it comes to city planning and transportation to have it all, right? To actually have the throughput, have the convenience, have the user experience, and still be able to be carbon neutral, or at some point start to sequester and reduce that carbon footprint. So it's kind of crazy in terms of the potential, but let's talk about more practically. Again, I know you guys have been doing R&D and a lot of continual work, but what is the level of confidence that a large scale implementation is feasible, and by when?
So we have done a lot to build at scale. So we've got a large tube in Las Vegas that we've done a lot of experimenting on, that we've learned a lot from the first time you built, a tube. We've changed our designs based on what we've learned by building and the like. We're in the process right now of integrating the first pod side powered vehicle that we discussed a bit earlier. And so lots of learnings that come from that. As soon as you do something at scale, as soon as you actually do something as opposed to talk about or design it, that's where rubber meets the road and you actually have to go through this. But one of the big things that we do is we do a lot of component level testing. So we build these components, we build various test rigs, we run them, like treadmills, to basically run these things for hours, get the energy efficiencies and get that. We then took it a step further and we actually went to an outside technology shop to independently validate these results. Because one of the things that's been fascinating as we talk to investors is like any one piece of the technology we're developing is fairly dense and intimidating. So how can they be confident that we're selling them something that is actually real, that the data is real and that it will actually work? So we've used outside partners to do audits of the technology, to come in, look at our data, explore our processes. It also makes us better at what we're ultimately trying to do to get those outside opinions. And so what we really pride ourselves in is, by showing and by doing that we can convince people that this is possible. Because until we built the tube, until I rode in the pod just a couple of months ago of last year, people thought you couldn't make a Hyperloop safe. People thought you couldn't build the technology, and now they see it. And that realism gives the excitement, gives the possibility that this is going to happen a lot sooner than most people think.
It's interesting about human nature. When you think about the railroad owners that saw the early stages of air flights and thinking, gosh, that's never going to really take flight and take any business away from us. And certainly it hasn't been the case. Similarly, rail I wonder what their position is as it relates to what the Hyperloop could potentially do, as well as even trucks and other forms that are starting to become more autonomous.
It's a great question. I think one of the things that we see is who will be our partners as we go forward. And as we start to shore up our suppliers, supply chain, strategic partners, each one of them is kind of looking at us as this unique piece of technology, because typically short haul flights or an aircraft company doesn't have access to a lot of train style markets, right? Typically a train company might not have access to short haul flight markets. A car company, a truck company can't access some of these other things. So now when you look at the technology, it kind of spans. It could be augmenting a lot of each of their individual areas, or it could be allowing them to expand into a new potential realm. But this idea that you could do same day shipping to all four corners of the U.S. with a central facility in Nebraska, that's kind of revolutionary in a way, right? You don't have to have this distributed warehousing, logistics space. You're literally putting everything together, you're distributing it out, and then you just have your last mile solutions. And that's a really interesting thought about moving and disrupting the supply chain and the way that we actually get goods, but also the way that people would move around as well.
I'm going to ask a kind of off the ball comment is that, we're thinking about it in the context of course, highly dense and populated regions and cities, both in-state as well as interstate. But let's talk about it in the context of, terraforming, let's say the moon, for instance, or Mars for that matter. Because of the kind of radiation level, gamma rays and other harmful rays, really, I think the kind of terraforming that's going to have to happen on these, let's say, unique places is going to be mainly really underground to a great extent. So why do you think that this type of technology is critical not only for Earth, but also for wherever we may be going outside of space?
Don't forget to visit astroperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Damian Vaughn, former NFL player, Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank, and many more. To register, visit astroperkins.com and click on Events.
That's a new question for me. I haven't had that one in quite some time. But I think what people are really looking at is making a piece of technology survive in a low pressure or vacuum environment is actually fairly challenging, right? So when Hyperloop is fully operating around the world, we'll be the largest manufacturer of essentially spacecrafts on the face of the earth. So there'll be a lot of knowledge about how to do that cheaply, how to do that at scale, how to do that with the pieces of technology that actually are rated and need to be rated for those type of conditions. The other thing that I think is really interesting is that energy efficiency will be at a premium anytime you're moving anywhere else, right? How many solar panels do you need to build? How many, nuclear reactors may you need or something like that on these different planets? And so everything, every watt, every kilowatt hour, whatever you're going to do needs to be ultra efficient. And so finding ultra efficient, high power devices is something that we're, really pushing the state of the art in and I'll say pushing at scale. And so I think a lot of things can be learned when you look at, 2030, you'll say, oh, well, Hyperloop was really pushing the state of the art and, multiple packs. I mean, we have the same amount of energy as 16 Model S's on a single vehicle. How are they able to do that efficiently? How are they able to do that redundantly, safely, reliably, and being able to switch seamlessly and still maintain full operations? That's the state of the art. That's what we're pushing right now. And I think that has a wide variety of uses, both on this planet and others.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Now, our listeners, because of human nature, is they're excited about what you're saying, but at the same time, there's a part of them that's asking these kind of questions that you've heard from other naysayers, which is, what happens if the vacuum, malfunctions, or what happens if there's an accident, and all these types of things. What if? How would you address some of these kind of concerns, whether it's real or myths or misconceptions?
Definitely say they're misconceptions, because I can assure you that question about what happens if the pod is breached or there's a loss of pressure in the vehicle, that was the same question my wife had before I got it. So when we wrote it last year, we had to go through all of those safety practices. We had to do that with an independent safety assessor, do that very, very rigorously. And the point of that was to show that it was possible. It changed our way of thinking. Before that, as a company, we were about really doing things as quickly as possible. And then it became about, all right, now we're responsible for human life. And what does that mean? What does that mean in the way we do things, in the processes we follow, in the checklists we follow, and the designs that we create? And so when it comes to the pod being breached or a breach in the vacuum, when it comes to levitation and making sure that the vehicle would never crash into the track, or when it would come to fire on board the vehicle, we have a lot of mitigation strategies for these and multiple redundancies that we're working on, because that's what's required of us by our customers, and ultimately will be independently approved before ever being installed anywhere in the face of the earth. So we went through kind of a pilot program when we put myself and a colleague in last year to see just how difficult will that be? What will we learn? How we improve our processes so that we can get better as we go through the next couple of years.
Well, it's interesting. I think the way I rationalize it is, people that ask these types of questions probably, or maybe choose not to recognize that it's more dangerous to be in a car. I mean, whether you're flying or being on rail. And at 20, 30 years later, when we have incredible ubiquity of flying vehicles and drones competing in the airways, I personally, frankly, would rather travel via these pods, frankly, because it's just going to be safer and more convenient. And that's also the case with Metro. So I'm very excited about what this is happening, very excited that it's getting to a point of commercialization and scale. Can you talk a little bit about kind of quick, kind of the next few years, what we can expect in terms of key milestones?
So the next few years, we're integrating this, over the rest of this year, we're integrating the vehicle that's the pod side vehicle. I'll begin to do some testing on that, really the first vehicle of its kind anywhere. That'll go on for quite a bit of next year. Then it'll be really, how do you commercialize this? So what we're doing is we're going from showing that a vehicle can work to showing that a fleet of vehicles must work. And that's a pretty big difference between single vehicle and a fleet of vehicles. So that'll take us another couple of years. And so by the middle of this decade, or the decade of Hyperloop, you'll have an independently safety assessed or safety approved vehicle. And that will really be one of the unlocking milestones for project deployments around the world. And we'll have a couple of pilot projects beginning sooner than that, but you could start to expect to see mass amounts of people riding Hyperloops, in 2027, 2028, 2029.
Very exciting. And again, congratulations on your new son. And you can be proud that you contributed to reducing the carbon footprint. So with that, I have been joined by Josh Giegel, who is the CEO of Virgin Hyperloop. Thanks for joining today.
Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.